minorities, yeah, y'all do experience discrimination, but it's only in light of what Black
What happened to
Americans,
us?
right?
So this is my question.
I'm sorry. Let us know, like, shout or holler, because we're
Oh yeah, my bad, Chris.
I
yeah.
just no, you good. You good. If I feel like I need to chime in, I will.
Okay. I was gonna ask, and this is my again, me on the radical tip, right? I don't believe that all Americans are created equal, mainly because the price that I paid for America is totally different than yours.
Yeah.
And as someone who
Mhm.
immigrated to this country in the past 100 years, I personally feel as you have no say in what justice looks like for me because you just got here. You don't get to come into my house and then tell me what I'm supposed to have. And I kind of will go back and forth with anybody who says anything because in there's hierarchy in all things, whether it's companies, businesses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So as a new immigrant to America, why do we have an Omar Ilhan or someone of that ilk who says no, we shouldn't do reparations? Yo, you just got here.
Yeah.
I've been here for 400 years. How you gonna tell me what I'm supposed to have? Or
Exactly.
we look
Yeah.
at our government, they're like, no, reparations isn't necessary. Your people immigrated here in the, let's say, the 1900s. You don't get to tell me what we get because your bones aren't buried here. And if we look at all these different groups of Americans, let's be totally honest about it. We know who's Ghanaian. We know who's Kenyan. We know who's Irish. We know who's Polish. We know who's Haitian. We know who's Jamaican. We know every American is here. We know where they come from because they let you know. I'm Irish. I'm Ghanaian. I'm Bahamian. They say they originally. I'm American because I'm from America. I built America. And if you can't understand that part, matter of fact, I know that you do understand that part. Because if I come to Ghana, you're not going to allow me to make decisions for Ghanaian citizens as an American. If I go to Jamaica, I can't make decisions on Jamaicans due to Americans. And I think we, as a community, an ADOS community, we're the only people that don't understand that what we're allowing people to do that affect us, we could never do in their countries. And they know that as well. And I think it's our responsibility to call them on that.
But here we have laws that say as long as you are born in America, you are a citizen.
Yeah, which is, and it's no push against different. That doesn't happen anywhere else in the world.
No, it does not. And I think when it comes to certain issues like that, that's part of the problem that ADOS have with Kamala Harris, because yes, she is an American citizen,
and she is black,
and she's black. Her father's Jamaican. ...
But okay.
See, asterisk.
Father is Jamaican, which, well,
what you say, Chris?
I said you always got to put an asterisk by her name.
Yeah,
yes,
I mean,
yes, you do.
Because we say Jamaican, but there's white Jamaicans too.
Facts.
But we're just based off of what she says and the color of her skin. We're gonna assume that her father was black Jamaican.
That's
would make her half.
And I have.
There's pictures of him. There's pictures of him. He's kind of a darker man.
And I read articles that said that he comes from a lineage of people that own slaves in Jamaica. Because we also have to look at her mother is a Brahmin Indian, which is the highest class of Indians in India. So we have to think about what are the chances Kamala Harris talks to somebody like me. You see what I'm saying?
So in that, so you have a woman whose mother came from India, whose father came from Jamaica, but because she was born in America, she is qualified to become vice president. I think one of them isn't so friendly. The other one is kind of chill. I guess we'll find out. So when it comes to immigration, when it comes to not just immigrants, but other groups as well, when it comes to them saying that because they're discriminated against, they somehow should have a claim to some type of reparations too. It's like, it's like Layton said, it's like, what we all say in the ADOS, that these people chose to come here. And in most cases, their choosing to come here was at the knowledge of knowing that America for them was going to be a land of opportunity. Those opportunities were made possible from the work that ADOS ancestors put into this country first. So to say that because you come here and you can't get a cab, or you had to deal with the police officers, depending on where you live, constantly pulling you over, it's not the same as chattel slavery. So while it sucks that you're discriminated against, you don't have a dog in the fight of saying that you deserve some type of reparations comparable to what Black Americans are owed. So that's Chris, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I'm gonna go ahead and let you have that one. I just feel like, it's like there's been no program or any sort of there's been no effort that's been really made that's been specifically for us. At the end of the day, there's never been anything that's been in particular only for Black people or the Black people who are the descendants of the American slavery. So I mean, in any other arguments to try to act like they are or were in that vein quickly fall apart once you look at the actual participants of those programs.
Yeah. All right, so in that point, the last point I have here is a direct quote from the book, which says, "The existence of other groups deserving reparations does not in any way constitute a denial of the obligation to Black America."
Can you say that again?
Oh, the existence of other groups deserving reparations does not in any way constitute a denial of the obligation to Black America. So basically it means that just because other minorities or people of color are discriminated against and might have a claim to reparations does not take away from what is owed to Black Americans.
Very true.
So the next myth is about, it has to do with, again, the time frame of slavery and how people say slavery was so long ago. And this is reparations paid to Japanese Americans and Holocaust victims were made to direct victims and their immediate families. Therefore, they aren't precedents for Black reparations for slavery. And that's basically saying that those payments were made to the living survivors. While on the other hand, reparations for ADOS would be made to ancestors who are alive at least 4, 5, 6, and 7 generations removed from slavery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, I could see that. I could understand the argument, but I guess I'm a little perplexed in the fact that just because a time period has passed, does that mean that debt is not still owed? I mean, I'm sorry. Just because time has passed doesn't mean that the bill doesn't, it no longer exists. So what we're saying is, or I guess my point is that, so that would mean that America has outlined its own failure in taking care of this earlier when it could have and when it should have. So America is even more so at fault, and then even complicit in stating so. So I think anybody making that argument is actually saying that they acknowledge that America understands its fault and tries to take care of those faults, within a certain period to take, so that way it has an effect on the people to whom it was actually directed upon, or whatever that wrong was. So, and in not doing so for Black people, you're acknowledging the fact that this is a debt that's owed, and this is a debt that should have been paid and should have been taken care of. So, I think they negate their own argument by even making that statement.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in that point we have to go back to the fact that we know that there are still living descendants of slavery who were just, one or two or three generations removed from it, which isn't a lot,
That too. Yep, that too.
So in that, another, the debunking of that myth is that a delay should not absolve the community of the debt. The shackles of history are long-standing and must be removed.
Mm-hmm.
What was the question?
Reparations to Japanese Americans were made to living victims.
And it was
not their descendants, but to them and their immediate families. And the pushback from
it was the families too?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Their children.
Oh no, I didn't know that. Well, I know it was I think for Jewish Americans, y'all correct me if I'm wrong, that some of the verbiage that was included in the reparations for Jewish Americans, it was to the descendants of some of the Jewish Americans that were in internment camps. And I think the wording used was they are standing in the footsteps of their forefathers, so to speak.
Hey Lily, can you do that later?
So we have to think about that. Like, if it was good for the Jewish, it was good enough for us. And if the parents, the wives, the husbands, the children, the nephews, the nieces, if they were to receive those Japanese reparations, I think that's the rubric that we use for us. And what Japanese internment was like 2 years, maybe?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's the stuff that really gets me. My argument that I was making earlier was that, even making that argument, you're basically understanding that
Hold on, Chris. They got the smoothie machine running. We gotta see about going back there. I think that might be the move if it's open. Like, future living.
Look, I think sometimes it is and sometimes it's not.
Yeah, because they had like a massage thing. Yeah. I dig it. My bad, Chris. They should be finished with smoothie in a minute.
Oh, that's all good.
But what were you saying?
But you can hear us, right?
Yeah, I can hear you guys fine.
Perfect.
Yeah. But I was just saying, but going along with what you're saying, their internment was only a couple years. The Jews in the Holocaust was only a couple of years, and in both cases, they took care of those sets of people within a certain amount of time, relatively quickly in comparison to what's going on with Black people, which means that they acknowledge that this is a long-term debt, and they acknowledge the fact that they haven't taken care of it after all this time. So they're complicit in that.
And I think, Yvette speaks a lot to the debt is the debt. There is no, well, let's negotiate. No, this is what you owe based on what you paid them. They talked about that in the United Shades of America with W. Kamau Bell. They got the, and I don't know if he's a economist. I'm not really sure what his title is, but this was a German government official that spoke towards the equation of calculating how much Jewish people will receive from the German government. There's a formula. So he puts that formula in context for us. And that came to the tune of like $22 trillion or 19 trillion, something like that. And this is based off of his equation. So we have to look at that and say, okay, well, we didn't do this to ourselves. We're not the people that said don't pay us. You didn't pay us over the last 400 years. This is the number. So if we're going to fix the black condition in America, this is how you fix it. Anything outside of that, we can't call it reparations because that's not what.
All right, so the next two myths are that dwelling on slavery and pursuing reparations perpetuates the crippling psychology of victimization among Black Americans. And in that myth, are you familiar with this?
Oh, okay.
And in that myth, we hear a lot of people saying that, you know, we just have a victim mindset. You know, we're staying stuck in what's holding us back. Like we shouldn't let the past dictate our future.
That's what Akon said.
As Black Americans. And also, so coupled with that is another myth that today's Black Americans are better off having had their ancestors enslaved in America.
Better off than where we would have been in Africa?
Yes. Basically saying we should be considered lucky that our people were brought here.
So would you consider the Jewish lucky that they were taken to Germany? Would you consider the Japanese lucky that they were here? Would you consider Native Americans lucky because they happened to get taken over by the... No, the hell you wouldn't. Like, we have to put us in the same context as people that are of similar situations.
I mean, these 2 points, but people actually say this.
Yeah.
Like, if you get into debates, they will literally say that Black Americans have it so good, why complain? But and it's laughable, which is why I'm laughing now. It's a serious matter, but I think it's so hilarious that these are the arguments people come up with against reparations.
But I think that's a lot of that is based off of media, right? Because like y'all rap, y'all sing and dance, and y'all TikTok and y'all,
y'all are good, right? Y'all got, y'all all in the NFL and the NBA. Y'all
Facts.
Good, right?
Facts.
And the answer is no.
That decadent veil.
Yeah. But going back, the first point about having a victim mindset is kind of a serious one because I've actually dealt with council members who have said this in debates about whether or not Black Americans should pursue reparations. They say that we don't have, and if you know who they are, because
I know them.
They said, we no excuses. We shouldn't be stuck in a mindset that says that we can't make it without the government. Okay,
good. You're right, because they do say that. My pushback is this: can you show me anybody that made it without the government? Because you can't. Like, there's nobody in American history who's successful without the government.
And I think
group of people. Why?
Yeah, the real frustration in this myth is that not only are we battling white supremacists against it, we're also battling our own people.
But isn't that still white supremacy? I think that's the highest goal of white supremacy. Because
to make Black people think that
oppress themselves.
Yeah.
Because
make them think that they shouldn't rely on government.
You're different. Basically.
You have to do it yourself. You have to figure out your own way.
And they didn't figure out. They enslaved us. After enslaving us wasn't the means to acquire wealth anymore, Now you keep us on the bottom. You put your businesses in our communities. You over police us. You put us in internment camps, prisons, and then, you know, for multiple years, and like one thing begets the next. So understand, anybody that make those arguments, I will say out of my mouth, you don't know American history. Like, you can't, to make that statement, you have to understand how wealth was acquired. You have to understand what does slavery mean. Slavery is more than just the raping and the murder and the genocide. There was a lot of wealth created on that. And the wealth got more wealth, that we got more wealth. And whenever we hit a goal in American history, boom, you have the New Deal. Boom, you have the Homestead Act. All of these different policies are created to uplift a given group of people. And now, once we get into current day, now you have things like we talk about quantitative easing. You have all of these tax breaks that go to the rich that begets more wealth and even more wealth. But if you didn't start out with no wealth, you can't jump from one place to the next. Like as a community, ADOS people are downwardly mobile. So we have to understand how wealth was created. We have to understand a term called wealth calcification, which is what we speak about. Wealth begets more wealth. So when somebody says we have to get the degrees, we are looking at a group right now that is the most educated group of people in the history, in American history, Black women. They have more degrees than any other socio group in America. Yet the average Black woman is only worth, the average Black woman with the college degree is only worth negative $11,000. So it's not an education thing. You know, it's not a hard working thing. If you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, we work more hours than any other group. When you adjust for income, Black America saves more money, you know, when you adjust for income than any other group. And we have always done so. We have always made the most of the least. And now we're saying we're falling off a cliff. And that's not a guess, that's not an if, that's not a maybe. If we don't get transformational government and transformational policy, we turn into the untouchables of India. We turn into the Tasmanian natives. We turn into these different groups that are permanent undercasts in their respective countries. So that it ain't no ifs, ands, or buts. Ain't no maybes, ain't no possibilities. You and everybody you know are gonna be in a hole if we don't get this popping. And it might be 2 or 3 of us that get lucky, maybe. So if it's not for the collective, it's not gonna work. And it ain't no ifs, ands, and buts. Getting free student loan debt, I had this argument yesterday. People was talking about, you know, we need to push for student loan movement. That's only 30% of 15% of our population, because only 30% of Black people even go to college. 15% graduate. So now we're going to take a policy that it only affects 15% of our population, as opposed to reparations that would essentially take care of all of us. Like, and that's not an if at all.
Make sure this is still recording. Perfect.
Good.
Good. All right. All right. So we have 2 more myths for today, and then we're going to end. The next one is Black reparations will unfairly ignore the parallel plight of white poor. That basically means that
these are funny.
How can Black Americans get reparations when there are other poor communities of people? But
why are they poor? That is the question. Why are white people poor?
That is a very good question.
Why are you poor? Because it's not because you're getting discriminated against. We can throw that out.
Yeah.
Not because you coming from 400 years of institutionalized oppression. Let's throw that out. It's not because you don't have access to wealth. Let's throw that out. So what are we repairing? And there has to be, if we're talking reparations, then we're talking repairment. What are we repairing you for? What trauma happened that caused you to be poor today? And that goes for all communities. Because even in the Hispanic community, I would say the same thing. Because we know, like we talked about earlier, the biggest inflation, the biggest influx of immigrants were in the 80s. And now you have to show me what happened to Hispanic populations between the 80s and currently, and not saying that they didn't get oppressed, not saying that they didn't get discriminated against, because I very much believe they did. But the difference between you and I can show you from 1619 to 2020 what happened. You can't do a third of that.
Yeah.
We not the same. And stop thinking, and you know we ain't the same. You know it's no hill to come to for we was here, you know that. And I think that's one thing I've been on really lately. I'm not having these conversations with people. I know you know this. I know you know. Now, whether you admit it to yourself, that's one thing. But like, we not the same, and you know it. It ain't gonna take me but 5 minutes to break down to you why we're not the same. So we're gonna do what's right for us, because this country is built off of our backs. This country ain't built off your backs. And even to the, I would say, I guess it called a Western Indian, the Caribbean islands, because we know that they were in the West Indies.
West Indies.
They were enslaved as well. And my message to them is, you deserve reparations too, just not here. Now, if you want to take our rubric and take that to your respective country, go right ahead. But understand, I can't go to Jamaica and get that money, just like you can't come here and get that money. Matter of fact, all of the money that you getting here, and this is just my perspective, if it wasn't for my ancestors, you don't come here. We fought, bled, and died for the right for you to be here. That's why you don't get what we get. We was fighting for you before you showed up. That's why we not the same. And I know they know that, but I think as an ADOS community, we have to make the discussion about lineage. We have to, because we all get oppressed. We all get discriminated against. That's true. That is very true. I would never go against that. But your discrimination just happened in the 80s. That you ain't me. You ain't gonna never be me. Not here in America.
And we also have to consider that up until the mass movements of immigration from the Caribbean, from African countries, that blackness in America was fact. But that's what I said before. So when it came to terms like African Americans, we knew who we were talking about before before the 1960s. That was just us. It was just ADOS. We were African Americans. We took on that identity to say, like, we were brought here from Africa, but we are in America now. It was just some type of way to come to terms with what makes us different from white Americans.
Facts. And again, the proof that we have in this, because again, we all know everything we do is data driven. Before the Immigration Act of 1965, you have a black immigrant population that's to the left of the decimal. Why is that important?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say it's important because when it comes to what we now call flat blackness, in that during slavery, or when slavery initially moved from white people being indentured into servitude, yes, but eventually it came to a place where they said, okay, in order for us to have some type of determination against who should be enslaved, we're only going to ascribe this to black people.
Facts, because black people were flat.
It did not matter what country you came from. If you were black, you were enslaved.
Yeah, and that's not true.
So that's not true today. But it was then. So all black Americans in this country could have came from African countries. They could have came from the Caribbean. They could have came from wherever else. But once you were black in America, you were enslaved.
Yeah. And to further this point, something
there's no distinguishing amongst the groups of saying, oh, well, I'm black American, but my people came from. No, you didn't know where your people came from, because they robbed you of that culture. No matter what country you came from, there are arguments saying like, oh, well, Caribbeans were brought to America, and that's why we should get. I'm like, no. Once you came here, you stayed. You didn't leave. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So there's no saying that Caribbean countries have a stake in American ADOS reparations.
Not here.
Because once you were brought here, you were grifted into what is blackness for Black Americans.
But I think the pushback here, 2 points. One, I would go so far as to say most of the people making that claim that are from other places that are here in America that feel like they should get reparations, they
yes,
and they weren't grifted into our society because
as Black Americans, they came in as elite immigrants from whatever country they came from.
Exactly.
Looking at Kamala Harris's birth certificate, Kamala Harris' mother is identified as a white female.
She wasn't when she got here, though.
Facts. So,
maybe it was her father. It was her mother or her father.
Well, I know her mom was on her birth certificate, and her mother is listed as Caucasian on the birth certificate.
Yeah, but I think her. So it was one of her parents that I had a different racial identity when they first came to America versus when they got married and had Kamala and Maya.
Yeah, and I'm not sure on which was which. I will say this though, going to the earlier. Oh, go ahead, Chris.
But no, I was just gonna say, just kind of to piggyback off what you were saying. I mean, it kind of reminds me of, you know, when you see, you know, the LGBTQ LMNOP groups, you know, piggybacking off the civil rights movement to get, you know, to say like to act as if our fights are similar when they're not even close to the same. No, like we're not even fighting for the same things. What are you talking about? You know, so yeah, and so, you know, when I see that, and then I see the actual, you know, now we see like in Hollywood especially, but we see like there's an actual concerted effort being made to promote LGBTQ, LMNOP initiatives. You know, it makes me feel like, you know, like they piggybacked off our struggle, somehow got catapulted to the front, so to speak, in terms of, you know, the oppression Olympics, I guess you could say, and somehow we're now further behind because now we got them ahead of us, you know.
And then and I think the perfect example of what we're speaking about is the Black Lives Matter movement. That's a movement that's incepted by the deaths of Trayvon and Mike Brown and Mike Gardner, Amadou Diallo, Sean Bell, I go on forever. So that's the inception of the Black Lives Matter movement. Now when you go to the Black Lives, now or ADOS lives,
it was.
And now we look at it, it's an LGBTQ
or maybe,
portion.
I don't know. Hold on, because let's clarify. I think people within that movement say that it wasn't started.
Well, that's when it
to
gained
focusing
popularity.
on Black lives. It was started as a movement for LGBTQ.
So this is my issue.
But what happened is all the racial unrest that popped up in the mid-2010s and Black Lives Matter jumped onto that, and that's kind of how it became an issue of police brutality against Black Americans. People. But that's not what it was created to be. That's just kind of what it became.
My issue with that becomes that this is a gay movement, and nothing against gay movements or any of that. Don't call it black. You see what I'm saying? Like, you can't call that but black. Gay lives matter. That's fine. LGBTQ lives matter. Whatever. Don't grip.
Right.
Don't. Again, like Chris was speaking to, we have a history here. It's a very rich culture, a very well documented history. And what I feel is though you have different minority groups, whether it's Hispanic America with the Black and Brown Coalition, or the gay community to say we're discriminated. Not saying that you're not, but you got to stand on your feet like I got to stand on mine. And I know when you go into those rooms after the fact, when we start getting gay rights legislation, when we start getting gay marriage, you're not in there fighting for me. But the whole name of your operation is Black Lives Matter. That's what gets you in the room. And that's why I think it's very pertinent that we got to be in those spaces, advocating for us specifically, because understand no other group is going to advocate for us. And again, the proof in that is where we are here. here we are 150 years into American history, and not once have you had a big advocacy for something that's gonna work. And I feel like, you know, we've gotten support for the affirmative actions in the past. We've gotten support for low income minority legislations in the past, but none of that works. And the proof is where we are currently. So we're gonna have to do it ourselves. And make no mistake, we are very well equipped to do so. We are very well equipped to do so. But I think it's just gonna have to be a journey we have to take as a community. We have to coalesce around, like I was saying earlier, we have to coalesce around our lineage. Because if someone shares the same lineage as you do, there's a case there. But a lot of people say, like Barack said, I couldn't catch a cab in New York. You give a damn about you catching no cab, cuz that ain't a big issue. Cause you can walk where you want to go if you really want to get.
Why you brought on Uber?
Yeah, like
I felt.
But we gonna keep it going.
So the main takeaway is that when it comes to saying that groups like poor whites in LGBTQ and other groups of minorities somehow won't be considered
In
when
what?
it comes. Well, that was the myth,
Okay.
saying that that groups like poor white people will their issues will be ignored if Black reparations becomes a thing. And then when it comes to that, it's not true because here's the quote. So such an argument ignores critical differences in the historical specificity of the circumstances that have produced each community and key differences in the substantial my handwriting is bad here. Status of each community. So the circumstances that created the oppression of Black American communities is not the same that created poor white communities. It's not the same that created discrimination against minorities and people of color and other low income and even white women being oppressed. They can't be compared. Is basically what that meant. The debunking of that message. All right. Absolutely. So the last myth we're going to touch on today is regardless, there is no way, or regardless of all the evidence, there's no way to pay enough to compensate for the evil of slavery, so we shouldn't even try. Basically, there's just the number would be too big.
We could try.
It's too big. It's too big. Let's not do it.
We can't. So that's the myth.
We ain't gonna never be at. Let's keep it honest. They'll never be able to pay us for what we lost. That is true.
Right. That's okay.
They would never be able to pay the Japanese for what they lost either, or the Jews, or the Indians.
They'll never be able to pay off the U.S. debt, the national debt either.
Yeah.
And you have no intent to. Let's be honest.
Right.
Like,
and no inclinations to do so either.
Facts. So I think
why that's the case, why not just go ahead and add on to the debt, cut us some more, churn out some more bread, and let's go ahead and get these checks moving.
That's how I feel about it. Right.
I don't think you can pay.
My opponent's like, yeah, that's right. You're absolutely right. But here's what you could pay.
Oh, you're right. We can't, but you gonna pay something.
Yeah, we do have a price tag that we'd be willing to accept.
And you don't have to pay it all at once. We accept installments. We'll take a UBI. Yeah, for a couple hundred years.
Specifically for Black Americans.
Oh yeah, but see, that's to me, we're not having a conversation if we talk about including other people.
No.
If we include other people, then it ain't reparations, it ain't nothing to talk about.
No.
So here's my question. What do you say about like mixed mixed children and people who come from like mixed lineage, like their father's ADOS, but their mother is German or something like that.
I think it should be. I think there should be two.
And let's just say, but I'm just saying, and let's just say, those parents passed away, so now you just have the mixed child. Should the child just get half of what the daddy was entitled to, or like how does that work?
That's how I feel. I feel if you come from a mixed lineage, then like you said, if your mother or your father's ADOS, I feel like you should be half. And like if you have a grandparent that was ADOS, it should be a quarter. And anything outside of your mommy and daddy should be a quarter if they were in your lineage. But that's totally up to that we haven't went that far yet. But I feel as though they should get half, personally.
Yeah. Okay. So that means that there would be some white folks out there who would be entitled to a quarter then.
Percentage as far as what proposed reparations plan. I think it's just like, I think it's if you have the lineage of Black enslaved Americans
somewhere in your family,
and you also identify as Black American, African American, whichever you want to call it.
But see, I feel like
if you identify as biracial, half Black American, then you qualify. I don't think it goes as far as saying like, I don't think it goes as far as saying like, oh, my grandma was half Black, but you identify as white.
Yeah, no, you don't count.
So no.
Yeah, for sure. You have to identify as Black yourself.
Yeah, you have to have taken on what America has placed
on Black people.
Yeah.
And I think from how they say it, from how I've seen it in the videos, like you yourself have to identify as Black, and then you have to prove someone in your lineage identified as Black before 1965 or 60 or something like that, due to the Immigration Act. And I think that's simple. Like, I don't really know any Black people that can't prove that somebody in their family wasn't calling themselves Black before 61.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, I don't think I know any Black people that can't do that.
Okay.
But yeah, I think it should be partial to an extent. But I think
I'm just trying to think of ways that, because I know like anytime, I just think about the ADOS Act. You know what I'm saying? So I think about something like the ADOS Act and how, we got the $5 Indians, and all these white people out here, especially in Kansas City and the surrounding, claiming to be of Indian ancestry when we know good and damn well that ain't the case. So I'm just trying to figure out ways, or trying to think of how we can make sure we can bar any other white folks who trying to jump in on something and saying, well, look, money train, me too. I had a mixed grandmama way back when.
There's a safeguard against that, and that's why it says that you have to have identified as Black American on the census for at least 12 years.
Yeah, but see,
me personally, I think it should. Part of me says that it should be longer, but then another part of me says, then that excludes children under the age of 15.
I don't think so.
It does, because then you would have to be 15 or older to qualify.
But wouldn't the descendants, like if I was to receive reparations because both of my parents were ADOS, and I have a child that is her parent or his or her mother was ADOS as well, I feel like that child qualifies automatically.
Yes.
Regardless of how old they are. You see what I'm saying? And I think the key, like Chris was saying, it's in the lineage, because if you're not, there's no reason, if you could identify as another ethnic group outside of Rachel Dolezal, that you would choose to identify as Black. You see what I'm saying?
First of all, those white women grifted into
the culture,
the top tier of what Black Americans have only started to achieve after hundreds of years, because they were white. And
that's a small minority.
They benefited from being white up until a certain point of them drifting into Black. It's not the same thing.
Yeah, I agree.
But I think in that there's a safeguard of the census saying, okay, you have to identify as Black American because due to slave masters who raped women and bore children with them, and those children may have been light enough to pass
That's
as
what.
white. So then those
Yeah.
white
Mhm.
Well, no, because I need to, let me go do
would
my phone.
also have a lineage of enslaved Black Americans.
That doesn't
Because, but since they
identify as
don't
white.
identify,
They don't get it.
but since they do identify as white,
Send me
they
the text of where the game is, nigga.com after I get the
Black
car.
reparations.
I agree. I agree.
Don't worry about it. You can have a
Can't jump
conversation.
in.
No,
You
you,
can't jump in.
right. You can't be like, hold on, my grandma said that she was passing,
Get out of
and,
here.
and like,
Okay,
well,
so
you're,
you really have to do that
She
way.
played you, and you probably only get half because you're gonna have to find another
no,
Black.
you don't get anything.
Yeah.
Right, your
You went to the other side.
yeah, I'm sorry, your family
That's
were,
off, man.
I mean, your family were right. We had to say that.
They fight.
Oh,
Yeah,
I do want
I
some.
think that's very fair, and I think something we have to be very vigilant on as well. I keep
Okay.
saying that, but look at what do they call it? The 5 civilized tribes, the Indian tribes. So these 5 tribes that are recognized by the United States government, when they were differentiating between who would get the benefits of, what do they call them? The reservations and the casinos and the tax breaks and all of that.
All the
Mhm.
treaties that they created.
When they created those, they said that you had to be, and I forget the exact percentage, but you had to have X amount of Cherokee blood in you. You have to have X amount of Seminole
It
blood
was
in
like
you.
a 16.
I don't remember. I have no idea.
It
I
was-
just know it was something specific.
Yes.
And-
I mean, you had everybody.
And they turned away Black people, like real Black Indians. Like I have a great grandmother, or my great grandmother was full blood Choctaw Indian, and weren't recognized as Choctaw Indians at all. And I think we have to have that same vigilance and that
Even
same
though they
specificity.
were
Oh yeah, they were
in
full
the
blood,
tribe.
but
They were members of the tribe.
she was members of the tribe. She married a Black man, or whatever they did, jump the broom, however that worked. And they had a bunch of children. And so now around the 1860s, which was way before my great grandmother, but when we tried to go down that road, it was like, nah, like we weren't accepted, despite the fact that we share that lineage. And I think when people say that our policy or how we distinguish who gets reparations, they'll say it's divisive. They'll say that, we're causing a split among the Black community. And my pushback on that is it's already a split, because we know that Ghanaians and Kenyans very much differentiate from one another. We know that Haitians and Colombians differentiate from one another. So why is it that American descendants of slaves aren't given that same leeway to differentiate between us and everybody else? And I think the reason for that is because a lot of these white people that you think are Black they ain't like us, like Joy Ann Reed.
I think I was just gonna say, just to answer your question real quickly, is because prior to now and any sort of moment, before now, like anything associated with Black American was bad.
Yes.
That's why.
Yeah.
That's why. so like it was like, and then when it was cool to be proud to be Black, they brought gangster rap into the hip hop industry, and that helped to kill that noise real quick. You know what I'm saying? So we had a lot of things that were associated with Black, but it seems like every time something good started to come out of it, something else came to say, no, let's push that down.
And I think that's the cost of where we come from, right? Like we've always been oppressed in that way. Like whether it was getting off the plantation, whether it was integration, whether it was the Black Wall Street starting businesses, we've always been met with that resistance. And I think that's something I know I noticed other immigrant groups aren't met with that same resistance. Like Africans don't have a problem starting businesses like we do. Neither do Hispanics, in all honesty. Now, I think they're oppressed? For sure. But I also know, I definitely think Hispanics are oppressed.
You have to depend on what what groups you're talking about, because there's a difference between immigrants, elite immigrants, and those who came here seeking asylum.
Yes, but
So
but
Mexico.
go ahead.
So what happened with Mexicans once parts, I think it was like Texas and Arizona, once those states became a part of the United States, those Mexicans that were in those states were allowed to identify as white.
They were naturalized, I think is
Yeah.
the word that they use.
Yeah.
Yes.
But they're not the same as asylum seekers coming from Mexico saying our countries, our states are war torn. You know, we have these drug wars going on. We're scared for our lives. They're not the same.
Well,
They're white.
Well, this is my issue with
Mexican.
those refugees, and specifically, I think about Minneapolis, Minnesota, is a sanctuary city for Somali immigrants. You know, that's where Omar Ilhan is the governor, I guess. They have
Omar.
She's a senator.
No, Congresswoman.
I don't know. I could totally be fucking up.
Congresswoman.
So this is my thing. They receive benefits in Minneapolis. Being a Somalian refugee, you receive benefits in Somalia. And my question then becomes, how do we give Somalian immigrants benefits, like cash benefits, as well as other things? And we can't even do it for us. Like, because generally the pushback I get is we're a numerical minority, so we'll never be able to pass reparations because we have to get more people to vote for it. Well, hell, we like at least 10 times as many of us as it is Somalians, and they got that. You just got to fight. And I think that's a big push that I have with a lot of people in our community with this if and but type shit. Like, because I ain't got
isn't that something that just falls underneath just immigrant rights or some of the immigrant protections that they have? I don't think that there's something that's specifically for Somalians. I think it's just for immigrants in general. Because I know, like in my neighborhood in Chicago, that we had there was this store that was right on the corner that was run by Arabs, and they had like just come into the country, but they were telling us how they didn't have to pay taxes for something like 7 to 11 years or something like that, depending on their status. You know, so I mean, there are some certain protections and legislative movements that have been made, for the benefit and to the benefit of certain immigrant and immigrant classes. I don't know if that's like all immigrants across the board or if that's certain ones. I don't know how that works, but I mean, considering Saudi Arabia and Somalia ain't too far apart from one another. So I don't know if that's something like that or if that's just for all immigrants in general. But you're right though, when we compare immigrants to Black people here in America, they still don't add up to all of us, and we've been here and we still can't get a lot of those same protections.
And we
I think we're gonna.
Okay, yeah.
We're gonna. Yes, like. Oh, 30. All right, so one more point, and then we'll wrap it up.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, I think we have to understand, specifically in our communities, we have to understand that our path to reparations is gonna be unlike anybody else. We're gonna have, hurdles nobody else has. We're gonna have to go up against a lot of things just based off of the history of America. And I think something we have to keep in mind, because it's something I constantly keep in mind for myself and having these conversations, be it online or in person or, wherever we have them. Because I was gonna make earlier about Malcolm and Martin, when we were talking about, we fought for the right for other immigrants to be here. Understand when Malcolm and Martin was doing their thing, wasn't no Black immigrants. Because we talking about in the late 60s, there was no influx of Black immigrants until like another 20 years later. So
no, that's not true. That's not true. There were Egyptian immigrants at that time.
After
but when the Egyptian immigrants were coming into the United States, they was coming through and they were told to put Caucasian on their application.
Yeah, facts. And we have to think about it. Like you said, they did trickle in, but what? Malcolm dies in 68? You know what I'm saying?
It wasn't until the 1980s.
And so think about that when we think about what they were advocating for, when they were talking about fighting for Black people and doing for Black people. They was just talking about ADOS people. That was only who they were talking about because there wasn't any other group of people here. That's why you don't hear them differentiate because there was nothing to differentiate in between.
Right.
And so when I think about,
when they said black people,
they were talking about us.
Black Americans.
Because like you said, we were flat at that point. We were very flat. I think we're very flat now, to be honest. But the thing of 32 million compared to 10 million, it's way more of, it's 3 times as many ADOS people as there are immigrants. But also knowing this, because something else Yvette talks about that I keep in mind regularly. We don't need everybody. We just need a critical mass. Because most of Black Americans did not like Martin or Malcolm. When they were alive.
When they were alive,
Nobody really liked it. Of course, we actually go through that in the conversations that we have because, you know, all of the pushback that we get from our advocacy. And that's how I know we on the right path because that's the same thing that they went through. Because didn't nobody like all the back and forth, but everybody that I talk to, I have this conversation with. Nobody wants to fight for reparations, but everybody will accept reparations once you get there.
Oh yeah, I hear that a lot.
Absolutely.
Understand?
I hear like, well, you know, it sounds good. I hope y'all get it, and I'm like, you gonna have your hand out, but what you putting in now?
And I'm gonna tell y'all this because this is how I be looking at it. I don't want them type of people around what we doing. I don't, because you're not gonna do nothing. You're a sheep and you probably gonna jump on the board once we get it rolling. Just like I have been hearing for the past year or so, reparations will never happen. Ain't no way they'll ever do that. Whoop-de-whoop. Boom, we get a bill passed in California. Now, a lot of people ain't got nothing to say about that. But you told me we was-
And North Carolina.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You said we wasn't on that. Now we got the first bill passed and it's gonna keep happening because everything that they're saying we need to do don't work for us. And we can prove that. So we just gotta stay diligent. We gotta stay at it. You know what I'm saying? Keep doing the research. Keep having the conversations. Keep hounding people on Twitter and Facebook. Keep it alive because the work is being done. The work is definitely being done.
And on that note, we're going to end for today. Next week, we're going to start with chapter 13. We're going to go through the specifics of what a reparations agenda will look like. We're going to have all the data and we're going to discuss all the points in. So thank you again for tuning in today. Again, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe.
Share.
Oh, and share too. You can find us at ADOS Kansas City on Twitter and Facebook. If you go to Twitter, our pinned post also has a link to our weekly updates. What's the 411? If you're interested in joining us here in the chat, there's a link to that as well. And we will see you next week.
All right.
Bye-bye.